You do? Okay. You and Kyle got this all figured out? Okay. Let's go ahead and have opening prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for as we close the Sabbath together as a church family. And we ask that you will bring blessings upon us and help us to leave here wanting to be a blessing to others after hearing about Jeff's testimony of Papua New Guinea. Amen.
Oh, he's there now. Well, good evening, everyone. So I've only shared this with maybe, 6 churches so far. But whenever you have in a church, you have a Bible verse to show. So I'm going to show that one now. This is it right here. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee. It was actually on Wednesday, July 2 in 1997, that we did show up in Port Moresby. That's the capital city in Papua New Guinea. Right after we showed up, the president of Pacific Adventist University picked us up and took us right over to their property and told us that we could live in that right there, that duplex. But what happened was the very next morning, somebody showed up and knocked on that door up there on the left. It was Dale Goodson. He told me he has already flown all the way out to the western province to a village called Balimo. He then told, well, the reason he had to go there is because AFM asked him to prove that they do need a missionary for the Gogodala people. He then told me he wants to fly again, but with me, to show me where to start that project. And I said, we can do that. The very next day on Friday, we did get a flight scheduled. When we showed up, we got out of that airplane. We walked right past some little fence. Somebody saw both of us walking there. He came over and asked Dale, why are you back here in Balimo? And he just told him, I'm here to show this person where to start the Gogodala Mission Project with Adventist Frontier Missions. He then said, I am the one driving that truck over there. You two can get in the back of it. I will drive you into Balimo. It would take us an hour and 30 minutes to walk where he drove us. When we showed up there, somebody came out of some grocery store. His name was Roy Biama. Roy came out. He was the only Gogodala person who ever was able to have any store in Balimo. He was the richest person ever. He just came out to get his key because he was the only person who had any vehicle in that village. He came out, he saw both of us, but then he came over and asked me a question. Why are you here in Balimo? And I told him, I'm here because our family is starting the Gogodala Mission Project with Adventist Frontier Missions. He immediately said, you are my missionary. You can live in that house I am building right now down the road. He was building 4 houses. He then told me why I was his missionary. He said 2 weeks ago, he actually flew over to Port Moresby, saw his brother Silva, and his brother told him, Roy, you have to close your store on Sabbath. And then what Roy told me was, yes, now I agree with my brother, and my store has been closed for 2 Sabbaths. But that's what happened when we showed up there just 2 days after we showed up in Papua New Guinea to start the Gogodala Mission Project. But something else happened while I was living there for a little while. You already heard what happened just 3 weeks later, but I don't know if it was 1 month later, some lady saw me. She told that village that her son died. They think that if their children do grow up again after they die, they definitely want to become white. That's why she said, that is my son. his name is Bekele, because that was his son's name, her son's name. So anyway, we did live there for only 6 months, but then there were two people who showed up. It was before the 6 months they showed up, but they showed up, Tomas and Wolfie, and they asked us, can you move to Kotali Village? And I just said, yeah, we could move to Kotali Village. I don't know why two people would say they wanted us to move there. But what I did learn later was Tomas actually told us, he actually prayed one time and said, Lord, please send us a missionary, a Seventh-day Adventist. I asked him, well, when did you pray that? We actually learned that it was almost the same time we decided to become missionaries. So he's the one who asked God to send a missionary there. So he asked us to move to Kotali Village. So our family, that's us right there, now in Kotali Village. Tomas was the one building this house for us to live in. It's a bush house. So that roof is just the sago leaves that they put on there, and even the wood around it is also just trees that they just cut and put them in half and just make the wood to put around there. But right before I left Balimo, Roy Biama told me, because he is now buying a walkabout sawmill, I'm the first person ever to get the wood he can make. I didn't need any wood. But he told me, you have to make a very good house there. He then made all that wood for me and didn't charge me 1 penny. He did everything. Now our family, my wife and I, we lived there for, it was 4 years and 5 months. But then we had to come back to America because she almost died. It was one morning, her temperature went way up. I took her down the river on our canoe back to Balimo. They have a hospital there, but no doctors. And when I showed up there, I did have a satellite phone. My friend Roy let me plug it in to call Les Anderson to see if he could come and pick us up. But he told me, you know, it's raining, I can't fly right now. So later that afternoon, I wanted to call him back and see when he could. But for some reason, they changed the electricity he could have at his building from 110 to 220, and it destroyed my phone. So I told my wife, I have to go back to our house in Kotali Village to use our ham radio to call Les to see when he can pick us up, because she has to see a doctor in Port Moresby. Well, when I came back the next day, I saw her. I told her, he's going to pick us up tomorrow. But then she said, there was someone who showed up at 6 o'clock that morning. The first thing he told her was, I had already been sharing the Bible with him, and he is keeping the Sabbath. But then my wife said something else. He actually had an angel show up last night, told him he has to come and tell me 2 things. The first thing he had to tell her was, no, you will not die. The second thing he had to tell her was, and your mission project will go forward, and because your husband's name is Bekele, he is, which means rock, he's the foundation of this mission project. Well, we showed up in Port Moresby. There was no doctor that could tell her a problem. We decided to go to Australia, to a hospital there. It was even an Adventist hospital. No doctor could tell her her problem. There was maybe a month later, she told me she has to live in Australia. She can't live in New Guinea anymore. But I would still travel back to our mission project every month too. But then the third time I traveled, I showed up at Port Moresby. I had a friend there that was teaching at that university who told me I could use his computer anytime to check my emails. So I just checked my emails. Someone sent me something and asked, can you become a teacher again in America? And I actually told him, no, I'm not done with the mission project, but I did answer every question. Well, then I called my wife to tell her, I am flying back to Australia tomorrow. But I told her that someone sent me that email. She asked me, what'd you tell him? And I said, I told him no. But that's when she told me she was talking to my mother that day before, and she told her, you have to come back to America. You're very sick. And then she said, she prayed and said, Lord, if I do have to go back, tell someone to email Jeff to see if he can become a teacher again in America. That then is the only reason that we decided to leave our mission project. Yes. What's that? The medical problem was about 6 months. But then we did show back up in America, and even here, well, she was in Michigan where someone said she had Lyme disease, so she did learn why she had to come back. But you even had some doctor here in Missouri that helped her a lot. But that is what solved it. But everything that Wawasi, I do have a picture of me and Wawasi now, but he's the one that told her that. But everything that he told her did happen because she's now 65 years old. So no, she didn't die. And our project went forward. We left in June of 2002. But it was only in 2004 when David and Cindy White became missionaries. And then 2007, Stephen and Lori Erickson became missionaries. And they're still there now, from 2007 to even now. And in 2021, Jason Sliger and his family became missionaries, and he was a pastor in Michigan. But the project did go forward again this year, too. What happened was last year, I had to meet someone. She was in her early 20s. She asked me a question. What's your favorite song? And I said, it's Wawa God. Now, if you ever want to hear it, I do have it on my phone, but it will take a little longer time to do that. But because I told her it was my missionary song, I asked her, do you want some mission stories? And she said yes. So I shared her the one I just shared with you about that person wanting the book who God fixed her because she said she'd keep the Sabbath. And then I told her about that lady whose back was destroyed, who God fixed because she said she would keep the Sabbath. That lady just stood up and said, I have to go see Michelle. Well, Michelle had to see me that day too because I heard her name. I asked her, do you want to hear my mission stories too? And she says, oh, I've already heard everything you told that other person. So then I said, well, then can I just share with you Daniel chapter 7? And she said, yes. Well, after I shared that with her, the last thing she said to me was, you are still a missionary. Why would someone say that here in America? I didn't know that. But then I just told her, do you want me to mail those documents to you so you can read everything I told you and even more? And she said yes. After I mailed them to her, 1 week later, she sent a text message, and what she said was, I have now read every single thing you've written. But the last thing she said is right here. You have to write a book. I didn't know I would have to write a book. I never wrote one. But because I shared so many mission stories with our church in Portland, Tennessee for 11 years, several months before she said that, they told me, you have to write a book about your mission project. Well, because I met them in April, in May, I decided to drive right down to teach services in Georgia. They are Seventh-day Adventists. And they told me, yes, we will do both of your books. And so now they have created both of my books. Because I had to leave New Guinea in 2002, I wanted to go back to see my friends. So in 2006, my Uncle Chuck and I, we both went back there. He had never been there before, but he wanted to go with me. In 2011, I went back again. That's when I learned that story about that lady whose back was destroyed. But I even met Wawasi that time too. And I asked him, the first thing I said to him was, so what exactly did that angel tell you? And he said, no, it wasn't an angel. It was Jesus Christ. That's what he told me. I can't prove that's exactly what happened, but that's what he told me. I even had a flight scheduled in April of 2020, but 1 week before I was going, COVID showed up, so we got canceled. Last year, because COVID was not doing so much, I decided I'm going back this year in January. But because that lady told me in April I had to write a book, and even my church told me I had to write a book, I then decided, do I have to write a smaller book that I can print to take with me? I then decided, yes, that's what I'm going to do, and I want to print 1,000 books. But after I did 500, I'm sorry, that's 400 there, that already weighed 49 pounds, and my other suitcase had 2 things in it, so I could only put 300 in there, but no. I only was able to take 700 of those books with me on my trip this year. But last year in November, somebody emailed me. Her name was Karen. She was our student missionary back in 1998 when we were in Kotali Village. Her boyfriend, Orion, was also a student missionary with Dale Goodson that year too. They talked a lot on our ham radio. But the reason she emailed me is because Stephen Erickson contacted her and told her that I'm coming back to New Guinea because they got married and then were missionaries in 2017 in New Guinea. And he even told her, I'm coming back and even coming up to Wewak. Well, here in America, that city Wewak would be in Washington State. But our Gogodala mission villages would be in California, down at the very bottom. But the only reason I was going up to Wewak is because in 2001, I went to a conference meeting. Every pastor in that conference was there, but someone on the very first day we had our meeting asked some questions. I answered the questions, but the one word that I said was vanilla beans. After we were done, I was the last person walking out of the church. There was someone sitting right there at the very back on the right side. His name was Obed. He was only 25 years old. He was there being taught how to be a pastor. Well, when I walked out, he just shook my hand and asked me a question. Do you want to start a vanilla project? And I said, yes, I can do that. He then told me he started one at his uncle's property up near Wewak. And he will tell his uncle to give me 100 cuttings to start a mission project, or not mission, but a vanilla project. When I showed back home, I told my wife, tomorrow I'm going up to Wewak. And when I met him, I met someone else who gave me 500 cuttings. When I went up 2 more times, I got 6,000 more cuttings. When I had to bring my wife back to America on May of 2002, I showed back up to take some people up there to show them how to do the vanilla project because I had to leave. My friend Kadu told me 2 people from Europe showed up. They were talking to the government, and they actually told them there in Balimo, we know that there's a vanilla project out there in Kotali Village. We have to go see that. Well, when they showed up, Kadu showed them everything. They just asked him, Kadu, who did that over there? He just said the missionary. Well, who did that over there? The missionary. Well, the missionary, the missionary. They finally asked him, what did the government do? And he told them, no, they didn't do anything. That guy immediately did this and told him, we will support this. Well, when I showed back up in 2011, I actually learned they sent $200,000. I even asked my friend Jack Mulaki, how's my vanilla project doing here in Kotali Village? And he said, oh, it's not just here, it's all over the Western Province. Every person who is doing it knows your name. But no, that's why I had to go back up to WEWAC. And my friend Obed, he's now the pastor at Pacific Adventist University. He even told me, because I emailed him, that he wants to travel with me too. So that's why I was going to WEWAC. But she told me something else that I never knew. She said, when you show up at Port Moresby, the capital city, at the airport, you can get a SIM card. So your cell phone will work here in New Guinea. I never knew that. They didn't have any cell phones when we were there ever at all. Well, I did show up on January 10, and when I got there, my friend, Pastor Obed, picked me up. Then I just asked him, where do you get those SIM cards? And he says, Digicel is the company. He took me right over to where they are at the airport. But the person told us, no, we don't have any SIM cards. She wanted me to be able to call her to tell her when to show up in WEWAC to pick us up at the airport, because they actually do live in WEWAC every 3 months. But then he told me there is a Digicel store here in Port Moresby that 100% has those SIM cards. I will take you there right now. We then went right there. He got out of his car very fast and walked right over to the entrance. It was a very big building with about a dozen stores inside. When I was now out of his car, I started walking over to him. He just turned around and came back and said, there's not one store open until 9 o'clock. It's only 8:40 right now. We have to stay outside. Well, we went right over by his car, but all of a sudden, he saw somebody that looked very confused, who was looking at me. He even asked that person, what is your problem? And that guy then asked him a question. Why does that white person over there have that word Bekele on his shirt? Well, when I went there in 2006 and 2011, I was there maybe 10 days. But now I'm retired. I was going to be there for 2 months. What do I need to wear now while I'm there? I then decided to use Uberprint to print some shirts for me with my pictures in New Guinea, and that's what I was going to wear. I even did get them to make 13 different shirts for me. Here's the first 3 ones I had. Me and our Gogodela Father Wolfie, me and my friend Raymond, and me and John Pundari. That was the 2011 visit when I met him. But I actually met John when we showed up in Port Moresby. It was December of 1997. Went to that church. Somebody standing like right up here says, today we have a guest speaker. His name is John Pundari. He is now elected as a Speaker of Parliament. That's Kevin McCarthy in our country now. After he preached that, he was right outside shaking people's hands. I walked out there. I wanted to shake his hand. For the very second he grabbed my hand, he did this. Why won't he look at me? He then did look at me, and the very first thing he ever said to me was, thank you very much for starting that mission project way out in the Western Province. I then learned that his uncle was behind his back, telling him who I was. His uncle was at that university to become an ordained pastor, and 2 months earlier, we did show up there too, and that church asked me to share with that church my mission story. That's why he knew that. But something did happen later. John actually told me, you have to meet me every time you ever show up in Port Moresby. Well, but this is the shirt that I actually had on, right there. Last year in October, my wife and I, we went from Kentucky over to North Carolina to see the mountains. I was driving down Tennessee on Highway 40, and I all of a sudden saw that sign, Obed River. That's one of my best friends who started that vanilla project. I had to take a picture of it. I even went on the website and found a picture of that river with rocks in it, which that's my name, Bekele. So I just sent him those 2 pictures, but because he was the one picking me up at the airport, that's why I had to wear that shirt when I showed up. But anyway, when that person came over and asked me about why you have that on your shirt, because Pastor Oba did tell him, he already knew I had this, but he just told him, you can go talk to him yourself. I just told him that I started the mission project. They gave me the name Bekele, but then he said something I never knew. He said the reason he knows that name Bekele is because he grew up in Kotale Village with his brother Raymond. I didn't know I was going to see my brother Raymond's friend, his brother, just less than an hour when I showed up. Raymond did the most things ever for our mission project. And if you even watch the video called The People Between, they even videoed Raymond and talked about what he did for us. But now I knew he was a Gogodala person. I had to give him my book. I then decided to give him this book because I wanted to take that for all of my Gogodala friends. But right after I gave it to him, oh, there was a lot more people who showed up and said, can I have it too? That didn't prove to me why I could not get my SIM card at the airport. Because my friend Raymond's brother and even 9 more people got my book in less than 1 hour now when I showed up. I didn't know that was going to happen because I was only taking them for the Gogodala people. After I got my SIM card, I did ask Pastor Obed, well, how do I meet John Pundari? I have to tell him that I am now back here. He then told me he's now built a lot of houses on some property that people are renting from him, and he even built a church on his property. It's only 3 miles past Pacific Adventist University, so he told me we can go there today too to see if we can find him. So we showed up there. His opinion was to walk on that property and just see who could give him the pastor's phone number so he could call the pastor and say, let John know Jeff is back here in Port Moresby. Well, after we walked around, we went in the church even, there was not one person that could give him the phone number of that pastor. Right after we came right out of that church, we're standing in front of 2 radio showrooms that John also created on his property too. But right after we were standing there, someone came right out of that second room, walked over and asked him a question. Why are you here on John's property? He said, I'm here because John has to know that that missionary right over there is now back in Port Moresby. But then she said something. She asked him another question. Is that Jeffrey Bishop? How would she know my name? She walked right over and said, you are Jeffrey, right? And I said, yes. She then told me, back when she was only 3 years old, I met her. She told me she loved everything I did with her. She even told me I gave her toys that she could play with that she did play with for many years. And then she said she had been wanting to see me again her whole life. She's now 24 years old. I then decided I have to give her that book too. So I gave her that one. But then I just thought something else. I'm only going to be here in Port Moresby for 6 more days. If I cannot contact John Pundari, I need him to be able to have my missionary book too. Because I have so many stories in there of people, a big story in there of him, but I just took 15 of those too to give to people who I have in my book. Because I just couldn't prove I could meet him, I just decided to give her that too. But 3 days later, she texted me, and she said, I have read your book about your mission project, and you have someone's name in it called Silva. He's my best friend. He even drives me places where I have to go. Well, because Silva's the one who told Roy to close his store on Sabbath, I got his phone number now, called him, and he told me he wants to come see me right there at Pacific Adventist University that afternoon when he's done working at 5 o'clock. Well, he showed up, and I was able to meet him. He's in charge of that police department there now. But he actually told me now what convinced him to become a Seventh-day Adventist, and he even told me that he only became one 3 years before I showed up. And even told me that he told Roy about the Sabbath a lot, too. I then now learned why Roy had to tell me, yes, now I agree with my brother, because he actually was being told about the Sabbath for 3 years, but was convinced to agree with it just 2 weeks before we showed up. So many things happened. But it was 4 weeks later, she sent another text message. This is what she sent me. Hi, Jeff. As a missionary, the Lord had inspired you to write that book. It wasn't a mistake. I read the book you gave to me, and it really inspired me a lot. I shared it on the radio, and some listeners requested for a copy. So I did some copy and gave it to them. I did receive a lot of positive feedback from them. May our good Lord continue to bless you in whatever you're doing. Now I know why I had to meet her when she was 3 years old. I didn't know anybody could read something on the radio that I had written. Well, we did go up to Wewak for 2 weeks. Then I showed up in Balimo. It was on a Friday, February 3. When I showed up there, I did call, I called Stephen Erickson and told him they're going to make me teach or preach a sermon here at this church, and so you can't pick me up until maybe Monday. But then after I did preach at that church, Roy's the one that actually built that church there too. I gave every single person a book too that wanted one, and they all did want one. But then it was 3 weeks later, I had to go back to Balimo, and Nasa and I went there. But I met this lady then. She was a teacher. Nasa told me someone stole her book. We have to go give her a new one. When I met her there, even with her students, she told me she's going to read that book to every student and even copy it for them to give it to their parents. So I just like the fact that I learned that. But she even let me share the story I told you in there too about that lady who wanted the book, The Great Controversy. So I even was able to share that story with them too. But then after Nasa picked me up, took me over to Kiowa Village where the Ericksons lived, Nasa already told me that next Sabbath I can preach at our Kotali Village Church, because that's the only church that we ever got started when we were missionaries there. But then on Wednesday, Stephen asked me, can you preach at our church? Well, my friend Nasa told me, yeah, you can do it at Kotali Village next Sabbath. So then I preached at his church. That's his training center that he was in. Every single person got my book. But then 2 days later, Nasa told me, there's someone here in Kiowa Village who has said, I have to go give them my book too. And Tom is the one that will take me there. Tom and his wife, his father-in-law and mother-in-law were the only people in that village that were members of our church when we were missionaries. Those two villages are pretty close to each other. Well, then I asked Tom, who is it that wants my book? He then told me, it's the village chief. That'd be your mayor here. He then told me he saw so many people walking down carrying my book. That's why he wants it. With that then convinced me why, yes, I had to preach at that church, because now even the village chief wanted my book. Well, when we went there, I don't even know why I thought this, but I decided to take 3 books with me, even though there's only one person who said they wanted it. We showed up. Went into some big building. There was a lot of people in there. After we went in, I did meet him. We sat down, I talked to him. And then I just gave him my book. But then I asked him, is there anyone else who needs one? I have 2 more. He says, yes. So I gave it to him. That very second, he told 2 men, come here. He then gave them the book. Well, after we left, I asked Tom, do you know who he gave the other ones to? And he said, yes. Those are the 2 pastors of the Evangelical Church of Papua New Guinea. So now the village chief and even 2 pastors who only will worship on Sunday have my book about Daniel and Revelation. After we left, we showed back up where the Ericksons lived. I walked over to their house. I saw Lori Erickson outside burning some trash. So I just walked right over there and told her, I now know it's your village chief who said he has to have my book, and even those 2 pastors got it. But then she told me something. She told me she read a book Ellen G. White wrote. She actually read it 1 year ago. She even told me what Ellen G. White said. Well, after she was done burning everything, we walked over, went together into her house. Stephen was inside already sitting down with his laptop and his cell phone. I then asked them, what book was it you read and what page number? Because I want to be able to see exactly what she wrote. Because people don't always tell you exactly what they read, but I just had to know exactly what Ellen G. White wrote. Well, Stephen did tell me the name of the book, but said he'll try to see what page number it was. But 10 minutes later, he just told me, I now have 2 pictures. I'll text them to you. So now I actually have what Ellen G. White wrote on my phone that I can show to anybody. This is what they read, and she just copied there. I have been instructed that the prophecies of Daniel and the Revelation should be printed in small books with a necessity explanation and should be sent all over the world. Those who eat the flesh and drink the blood of the Son of God will bring from the books of Daniel and Revelation truth that is inspired by the Holy Spirit. I even write the book, Truth Will Make Us Free. And even have that verse, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And I even have a lot of stuff in there where Daniel actually says, I have to know the truth. So no, it's all about the truth of what's in there. But then I just told Nasa, because he did pick me up in Balimo with the Erickson's dinghy, and that wasn't very good to travel to a lot of villages. So I asked him, is there anyone in Kotali village that we can use their dugout canoe? Because that's the best thing to ride down those rivers. And he did find someone that would let us have one. So he then did take me to 8 villages. I can't share all of them with you, but this is one of them. And there was 8 villages now that all got my books too. Well, after I was there for 4 weeks, I had to head back. Well, I had to go down to Daru to go see my friend Raymond, and then head back over to Port Moresby. But while we were walking back over to his house, some person saw me walking and said, are you trying to see John Pundari again? And I said, yes. She then told me she has a friend in Port Moresby. He's an attorney, definitely knows John Pundari. And she will contact him and tell him, I am going to show back up again now. Because I never, ever was able to meet him so far when I was already there. Well, after I did meet Raymond, I showed up there. I asked Pastor Obed, has John contacted you yet? And he says, no. No one's contacted me. But then on Wednesday, that was March 8, someone called Justin. He called me and said, I will pick you up at 4:30 and take you to John's house. Well, when I showed up there, I then decided that I have to show John Pundari what that Liana person read on his radio show, so he now knows what she said. And I even shared with him what the Ericksons showed me too. But then I did tell him something. I asked him, can we get another picture? And he said, oh, yes, I have to have one too. So we got another picture together again. Because that other picture that we took in 2011, it was every one of his family members that were there that time. He even told me back then, that's the last day they will ever be there. His daughter, his oldest one, was becoming a nurse, moving to Australia. He said they will never show up again. That's why I wanted to take that shirt with me too. But then after we got that picture, I just told him I have to stand up because I took my shirt off. I gave it to him. But now he wants to wear it too. So he actually wore that. But he did tell me something while we were there. I met him for 4 hours and 30 minutes, but one time he said, I have to go to my bedroom. Well, don't we hear people say, I got to go to the bathroom? Have you ever heard someone say, I have to go to the bedroom? I've never heard that before. I was just wondering, does he have to go lay down and sleep? But he did say he'll come back out. Well, he came back out about 10 minutes later, and he told me, come over here and sit down at this other table. So I came over there. But when I saw him sitting down, he had some bag he just picked up and put on a chair right next to him. Then he asked me, well, how much does it cost you to print your book? And I said, well, here in New Guinea, it's 1 kina. Well, right after I told him 1 kina, I saw his hand open that book up and go inside. And right when I saw it come out, I saw kina. He put it on my table, right next to me. And then he told me something else. This is 10,000 kina. I will pay for you to print 10,000 books that I want you to mail to me. I did not know someone was going to ask me for 10,000 of my books. The Ericksons did ask me something because Lori told me when she read that book, she wondered, should she write a book? But then she told me, no, I don't have to write one. We just want another 1,000 of your books too. So now there's 11,000 books people want me to send back to New Guinea for them. But there is something that happened. Last year in July, I went to AFM because they asked me to come there and share my mission stories that they could record. They couldn't video me, but people could hear what I would share. And then I asked them while I was there, is there someone here that can schedule my flight back to my mission project? And they said, well, her name is Kimmy, but we don't have to contact her. You can yourself. Well, after I called her, she said, yes, she will schedule my flight, but how long is my visa? I said, it's 2 months, and I want to leave in January. So she scheduled my flight, but she told me something that no one's ever said. Before you travel, I will investigate your flight. Well, 2 weeks before I was leaving, she had not contacted me, so I emailed her and I asked her, did you already investigate my flight? And she said, oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. I have to do that. I will do it today. She then contacted me and told me, your flight to leave Port Moresby is canceled. I was leaving America in January 8 and now leaving Port Moresby on March 7. Now, because I was only able to meet John Pundari, who now wants 10,000 of my books, that proves to me why that got canceled, because I didn't meet him until one day after I was already leaving to come back to America. So that then again proved to me that, yes, that's why that happened. He even told me he wants something on that book too. He just wants me to put there on the back that people can know that he's the one that is distributing my book. So now it can show up anywhere in New Guinea. But no. He even, I get a text message from Justin almost every day. But I did ask them, have the books showed up yet? Are they working? But then what I found out was the government, when you get something from another country, they have to investigate it before you can have it. So they were just investigating a lot of them. But they did send me a picture about about 3 weeks ago. They now had 2,500 of my books at his house. But now I've learned the same day he sent me that picture on tracking what's been shipped there, there was another one showed up too. And yesterday, there's another one showed up. I've only sent 4,000 books there, but now 3,000 are there. But there's something else that happened, because when I was sitting there with John, Justin said something to him. He said, well, I am going to do something with that prime minister. So here in America, that's the president. I actually learned that he meets the prime minister one day every week. I know 4 years ago, that prime minister, and that's him right there, he actually showed up in Balimo. And when he was there, someone told him, there's someone building a training center in Kiowa Village. It's a huge building. He then wanted to see it. So now their prime minister actually saw our mission project and even what the Ericksons were doing. I then wanted him to learn how that mission project got started. So I asked Justin, can you give him my books too? Because I wanted him to give him both of these. And he told me, yes, I can do that. But then after I got back here in America, because I met him on March 8, and then he wasn't going to meet him on March 9. I left on March 10. I just had to text him and ask him if they got it. But he didn't send me this text message. He said, yes, he was happy, and he asked me when I give him and when I relayed to him that you left already and asked whether you are coming back. That actually makes me wonder, am I going to meet the prime minister if I go back? I didn't know that was going to happen, but it sounds like it will happen. But when I sent those two pictures to my friend, Pastor Obed, last year in October, he sent an email back to me, because we've been emailing each other for many years. This is what he said. When I show up in America in April, can you take me to the Obed River to go swimming? I didn't know he was coming to America. He's never been here before. But when I was living with him, I learned that he was actually coming to Florida because Andrews University was teaching something there, April 17 to April 27. And I told him, yes, I can pick you up on April 28. That's Friday, and bring you up to our house in Kentucky. But because now I'm picking him up, who's taking him back to the airport to go back to America or go back to New Guinea? Me. Well, he showed up. That's me and him at our house. We even showed up at the Obed River. We only traveled through 7 different states here in America. But because he was now here, and I knew he was coming before I left to come back here, because the Ericksons said that they wanted another 1,000 books, I thought, I'm going to print them for him to take on his airplane. Well, I took him to the airport in Nashville. When I went there, I was going from Nashville to Los Angeles, and then on the Philippine Airlines to Manila in the Philippines, and then to Port Moresby. I asked someone, do I have to pick up my suitcases at California before I get in the Philippine Airlines? And that person said, no, they're going to show up in Port Moresby. So when I took him there, because he has 2 suitcases and those 2 boxes with my books in it, there's 500 in each box, I asked him, will his show up in Port Moresby? And he said, no. They will show up in Australia. This is American Airlines. That's where we take him. When Pastor Obed showed up in Australia, he sent me a text message, and he told me, He even called me on his WhatsApp. I cannot take your books to Port Moresby. The reason he couldn't take them is because they were charging him $960 just for 2 hours to fly up to Port Moresby. That was going to cost him 2,253 kina. He could not do it. I then just wondered, did God want my books to be in Australia? But we just prayed and said, Lord, you just do whatever. But 1 hour and 50 minutes later, he sent me a text message again. This is what he sent. Bekele, I saw God's hand today. I stood helplessly on the side, didn't know what to do, and suddenly a group of rugby players from Papua New Guinea showed up after playing with Australia. They showed me standing, and they asked me. I told them my situation, and they helped me, paid off the excess. Now I don't need to pay the 2,253 kina. I praise God. I did not know that somebody who was a sports player would come and pay, here in America it would be about $750 for those books to show up. But that does share with me that, yes, they do have to show up. But there's something else that happened. I didn't know if I would have enough time, but I have 5 minutes now. Because I went up to WEWAC, well, when I showed up in Port Moresby, Pastor Obed asked me to preach at his church. They only had about 400 church members. They only got 250 of my books. We went up to WEWAC. We did do to a main church the first time, but then he asked me the second time, where do you want to go the second Sabbath that we're up here? And I just told him, I don't know any churches here. He then told me, well, we do have an elder who does have a church at prison. When I was in New Guinea, I did go to the prison in Port Moresby at least 4 times to preach there. When I came here, Steve and I went to prison a lot too, to share stuff with people so they can maybe become Seventh-day Adventists. That's why I told him, yes, I want to go to that church. And when we got there, every single person wanted my book. There were even 4 people who said, can I have an extra one? Some even said, can I have 2 more? I want to share them with someone else too. But then probably the last thing that I'll share with you is this. This guy here is Daniel. I learned from the Ericksons that he was a Gogodala person teaching at a college in Port Moresby. He was the best English speaker. Ericksons gave me his email address. I actually emailed him and asked him, can you translate my book to the Gogodala language? And he said, yes, I can do that. Because that's who I wanted to take the book for. But after I emailed that book to him, he never responded. I didn't want to argue with him. I then decided just to print it in English, and that's what I took with me. But when I met him, because I showed up there in Port Moresby, I got another email from him that I can even get on my phone. I just emailed him back and said, I'm already here in Port Moresby. He then said, oh, I have to meet you. And then after we met, he actually told me, no, your book didn't show up when you emailed me. Because John Pundari wants 10,000 to share everywhere around the whole country. Because I took him up to WEWAC, I took him to Daru. That's why now I agree that, no, I could not have it written only in the Gogodala language, because there's so many people there now that can have my book. But that's why I do say this. Yes, God did hold my right hand and set me in the direction I needed to go, because I didn't know anything was going to happen that did. I didn't know someone would tell me to write a book. I didn't know I couldn't get a SIM card. I didn't know my flight got canceled. I didn't know if sports players would pay for my books to show up, and even the Ericksons would tell me they wanted another 1,000 books. But that's why, yes, I just think that God just took my hand and took me all the way down there. And even when I was getting ready to leave the Gogodala people, I asked my friend Nasa, can you take me over to Kotali Village so I can say thank you to that person who let us use that canoe to take me to 8 different villages? When I showed up there, I just told him, thank you very much for letting me use your canoe. I then gave him my book too. But he said something. Thank you very much for using my canoe. Well, after we left, we walked out, I asked Nasa, so who's that person? And he said, that's our village chief in Kotali Village. So even 2 village chiefs got my book. Did Ellen G. White say we have to write a small book and send it around the world? Is America part of our world? That's why I share that book with anyone here in America. Any one of you who want one, you can have it. I have them back there. If you want me to email it, then you have to take a picture of that. If you want that one you do have to pay for $10, but you don't have to buy it. But it does share a lot more stuff that happened. And if you want the video, I do have those back there too. But you just decide if you want any of that. And if you want to share it with anybody, I don't know, I've probably given it to more than 100 people in Kentucky now. But it's only about Daniel and Revelations, Daniel 7 and then Revelation 13 and 14. It's very small for that. But anyway, that's what happened that I did not know was going to happen this year. That I went back to New Guinea. Anybody have a question? My sister said she was going to be the one at the end, but she's left. She probably went to the bathroom. Huh? Okay. Okay. All right, well, let's just pray again. Father in heaven, thank you very much for letting me show up here and even go back to New Guinea. Keep guiding and directing us in whatever direction that you want us to go. In Jesus' name, amen. Does anybody want to hear the song, Wawa God? Every single church that I was there was a Gogodala church, sang that song. What did it mean? Well, I did tell the children this morning, but what it means is, because Wawa means father, it means, Father God, you be in charge of my canoe, and you paddle me in the direction you want me to go. That's the song that they sing almost every Sabbath, but they sing it at least 2 times. But when we were missionaries, they would sing it 3 times. But that's the very first song that's on this video that lady heard when she was there at that hospital. So, okay, I'm just going to walk back there, and if you want something, just show up right there.